Hello, Planet, and thanks for listening to episode 121 of Master English with Tim, the podcast where Tim teaches you English in depth and detail, and without ever hurrying. For the last several episodes, starting with episode 115, I have talked about the past participle, also called the third form of the verb, about irregular and regular past participles, about how to pronounce regular and irregular past participles, and the different situations where we use past participles. In this week's episode, we're going to take a second look at all the different grammatical constructions where we need past participles. We will also take a first look at some functions or uses of the past participle that we haven't talked about before. So this week's episode is very big, with 6 parts, one for each function of the past participle. Those 6 functions are the perfect verb tenses, the passive voice, as adjectives, in reduced relative clauses, in past participial phrases, and in the modal perfect. And if you don't know any of those or several of those, don't worry, because we're going to explain each of them. So the first use of the past participle is in the perfect verb tenses. We have 3 perfect verb tenses: the present perfect, the past perfect, and the future perfect. We will start with the present perfect because it is the most common of the 3. To make a present perfect sentence, we use a subject, then have or has, and then the past participle. 4 examples. 1. I have already cut the grass. 2. She has never run a marathon before, but she has run a half marathon. 3. Have you ever gone scuba diving before? 4th and last. He has been an English teacher since 2005. Okay, in those 4 examples, I said each word separately. For example, I have already cut the grass. So I spoke a little bit like that, but in real conversations, we usually don't say I have. We say a shorter form, I've. In case you didn't know it, these shorter forms are called contractions. Listen now to all of the contractions for the present perfect. So, complete form, I have. Contraction, I've. Complete form, you have. Contraction, you've. Complete form, she has. Contraction, she's. He has, he's. It has, it's. We have, we've. They have, they've. So all of those again, just the contractions: I've, you've, she's, he's, it's, we've, and they've. Also, we have the complete form everyone has or everybody has, and the contraction everyone's or everybody's. Now let me read the same 4 examples again, this time though with contractions. 1. I've already cut the grass. 2. She's never run a marathon before, but she has run a half marathon. 3. Have you ever gone scuba diving before? 4th and last. He's been an English teacher since 2005. Okay, that's all for the construction of the present perfect, but how do we use it? We use the present perfect to talk about 4 things: completed work, accomplishments, experiences, and actions that started in the past and continue until now. Let's start with completed work. For example, after you've cleaned the kitchen and it's not dirty again yet. After you've finished your English homework and your teacher hasn't given you more homework yet. Or after you've written a report for your boss. Listen now to one example. I've already cut the grass, so you don't have to do it. So the action of cutting the grass is in the past, but we still have the result now in the present. The grass, in other words, is still short. A similar way of using the present perfect is to talk about accomplishments. An accomplishment is something you did in the past that required work or effort to complete. Graduating from university is an accomplishment. Finishing writing a book is an accomplishment. Running a marathon is an accomplishment. One example. I've never run a marathon before, but I have run a half marathon. So the speaker has an accomplishment. A half marathon is 21 kilometers. That's a long distance, and doing that required a lot of work and effort and preparation. The action of running happened in the past, but now in the present, the speaker still knows what it feels like to run such a long distance. Let's now move on to the third way to use the present perfect. We use it to talk about experiences. An experience is an event in a person's life that is important or memorable. So, walking down the street that you've lived on for many years is not an experience. Drinking a glass of green tea that you bought from the supermarket is also not an experience. Running your first marathon is an experience. Riding a horse for the first time is an experience. Visiting a city in a foreign country is an experience. Walking down the street where you've lived for years when it is snowing so heavily that you can only see a half meter ahead of you, that is an experience. Now, let's imagine a situation where you are on vacation in Florida and you decide to go swimming underwater to see all the different colorful fish and plants, and you will need to wear a mask and carry air with you under the water. We call this activity of swimming underwater with oxygen, with air, and a mask to see fish and plants. We call that kind of swimming, we call it scuba diving. So imagine that you are by the beach now, and there is a person behind the desk in a little building that you're standing in who asks you, "Have you ever gone scuba diving before?" So this is an important question because scuba diving is dangerous if you don't know how to do it. Let's imagine that you answer like this: "Yes, I have gone scuba diving before." So this answer means that you have had this experience, you had the experience in the past, and you have the result of the experience now. What kind of result do you have today from that past experience? Well, the result is that you have some understanding of how to scuba dive, how to use the mask, how many minutes of air you have, and so on. And also, being in deep ocean water will not be completely new for you. In short, because of your experience in the past, you will feel comfortable today. That's why you would say, "Yes, I have gone scuba diving before." Now let's imagine that you answer that question differently. You say, "No, I haven't gone scuba diving before." This means that you don't have all that experience, and so you definitely will need more help. I would love to give you more examples of the present perfect for experiences, but we still have a lot to talk about in this episode. If you want more examples of the present perfect in experiences, then listen to episode 117. The last use of the present perfect is for talking about actions that started in the past and continue until the present. In this meaning of the present perfect, we use since, for example, since 2015, to say when an action started. We can also use for to say how long an action has happened until now. For example, for 10 years. Listen to two examples. Tim has been an English teacher since 2005. So, since 2005. This means that Tim became an English teacher in 2005 and still is an English teacher now. Second example. Tim has been an English teacher for 20 years. So, this means that Tim became an English teacher 20 years ago and still is an English teacher now. So both of those sentences mean the same thing. If you want more examples of present perfect sentences with for and since, listen to episode 118. Okay, now we are done with the present perfect, so we can talk about another verb tense which uses the past participle. This is the past perfect. The past perfect is not a super common verb tense, but we do use it from time to time. To make a past perfect sentence, we use a subject, then had, and then a past participle. One example. Listen closely because I will ask you 3 questions about it afterwards. When we got to the airport, we realized we had forgotten my passport. So, first question. Is the action of going to the airport in the past or the present? So, it's in the past. 2. Is the action of forgetting the passport in the past or the present? It's also in the past. Third and last. Which action happened earlier, getting to the airport or losing the passport? So, forgetting the passport happened first. So we have 2 past actions, and we use the past simple to talk about the more recent action, and we use the past perfect to talk about the earlier action. So, in other words, the past perfect is the past of the past. So one more example, and then afterwards 3 questions. I wanted to buy that red Ferrari, but when I went back to the store, someone had already bought it. So our same 3 questions. 1. Is the action of wanting to buy the Ferrari in the past or the present? It's in the past. 2. Is the action of someone buying the Ferrari in the past or the present? So it's also in the past. Third and last. Which action happened earlier, wanting the Ferrari or someone buying it? So someone buying it happened first. So again, you can see that we use the past perfect when we talk about one moment in the past and then need to tell about something that happened even earlier than that moment. So I will talk more about the past perfect in a future episode. Okay, that's all for the past perfect. So we have talked about the present perfect and about the past perfect. So does English have a future perfect? Well, yes, we do have a future perfect, but the truth is that we very rarely use it, and I think there are better ways to use our time. I may talk about the future perfect in a future episode, though. Okay, we are now finished with one very big topic on how we use past participles. We have finished talking about the perfect verb tenses. And now we can learn about the next big topic connected with the past participle. Our next big topic is the passive voice. You can form the passive voice in two different ways. The first and more common way is with the form of the verb be and a past participle. Here are 4 examples. 1. A large percent of the world's bicycles is built in Taiwan. 2. Fast-growing plants like mint can be grown indoors year-round. 3. The famous English epic poem Beowulf was written around the year 900. Fourth and last, there is no doubt that a lot of mistakes have been made, but it's time to think about the future and not the past. I gave 4 examples because we have 4 reasons that we use the passive voice. These are the 4 reasons. 1. We don't know who did an action. 2. We want to hide who did an action. 3. It's obvious who did an action. And fourth and last, the person who did an action is not the focus. Now I'll read the 4 examples again. After each example, try to think of which reason the sentence is in the passive voice. 1. A large percent of the world's bicycles is built in Taiwan. So here it's obvious who did the action. It was factory workers. 2. Fast-growing plants like mint can be grown indoors year-round. So here the focus is on the plants and not the people who grow them. 3. The famous English epic poem Beowulf was written around the year 900. So here we don't know who wrote the poem. Fourth and last, there is no doubt that a lot of mistakes have been made, but it's time to think about the future and not the past. And in this case, it's to hide who did the action. And in those 4 sentences, in those 4 examples, there was one thing that they all shared. In none of them did I say who did the action. But if we add the preposition by and then a noun, we can say who did the action. One example, Romeo and Juliet was written by Shakespeare. Okay, let's talk about another way to form the passive voice. I told you earlier there are 2 ways to do it, and a less common way to form the passive voice is with not a form of the verb be and the past participle, but instead a form of the verb get and the past participle. Using get to form the passive voice is usually connected with negative actions that can happen quickly, and this construction is typical of informal conversational English. 3 examples. 1. The pizza that I left in the fridge got eaten by one of my roommates. 2. She spent too long in the sun and got sunburned. Third and last. Every day, many millions of plastic cup tops get thrown in the trash. Okay, now we finished talking about the past participle used in the passive voice. We have another big topic behind us, and we are ready to move on to our next use of past participles. We can use them as adjectives. This is a function of past participles that I have not spoken about in any of my earlier episodes about past participles. In case you don't know what an adjective is, let me explain it. An adjective is a word that describes a person, place, or thing. For example, fast, green, smart, bad, important, and free are all examples of adjectives. Now listen to 9 examples of past participles that are used as adjectives. 1. Is she married? 2. This story is very well written. 3. I love eating grilled vegetables. 4 and 5. Is he married? No, he's divorced. 6. We will send you a corrected version of the text. 7. It's a crime to sell stolen phones and computers. 8. The company is releasing a new and improved version of its software. 9th and last. After several failed business ventures, Thomas finally achieved success. Okay, now that you have heard some examples of past participles as adjectives, you're ready to learn an interesting detail. We can take past participles of verbs and add the prefix un to them, or un. Remember that the prefix un means not. So uneaten food is food that no one has eaten. An unsolved mystery is a mystery that no one has solved, and so on. 9. 1. I need your undivided attention. 2. Uninformed voters make bad decisions. 3. The universe is full of undiscovered secrets. 4. I really need 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. 5. Dictators don't care much if they are loved or unloved. 6. Often people's opinions remain unchanged even after they receive new information. 7. The city government wants to buy that piece of undeveloped land and build a park on it. 8. If your unexplained absences continue, you will be fired. 9th and last. Please stop with the unwanted advice. Okay, now we are finished with our introduction to past participles and their use as adjectives, and now we can talk about the next function of past participles. Past participles are used in reduced relative clauses. First though, what is a relative clause? For our purposes, a relative clause is a part of a sentence that uses a word like who, what, which, or that to talk about a noun that was used earlier in the sentence. 4 examples of sentences with relative clauses. 1. Cars that are made by Japanese companies are known for reliability. So the relative clause is that are made by Japanese companies. 2. People who are affected by air pollution should stay inside today. So the relative clause is who are affected by air pollution. 3. Workers that are trained in Python or other computer languages earn more money. The relative clause is that are trained in Python or other computer languages. 4th and last. Bridges which are made of wood are not strong enough to hold larger vehicles. The relative clause is which are made of wood. Okay, now we've talked about relative clauses. So what is a reduced relative clause? A reduced relative clause throws out the word who, which, or that, and also throws out the verb be. So listen to the 4 sentences again. I'll read each sentence twice, once with a complete relative clause, and then once with a reduced relative clause. 1a. Cars that are made by Japanese companies are known for reliability. 1b. Cars made by Japanese companies are known for reliability. Okay, now for the next pair of sentences. After I read the first one, you should try to think of how to say the sentence with a reduced relative clause. Try to not just think, but in fact also speak the sentence with the reduced clause. Press stop if you need to. So 2a. People who are affected by air pollution should stay inside today. People affected by air pollution should stay inside today. Next pair. 3a. Workers that are trained in Python or other computer languages earn more money. 3b with a reduced relative clause. Workers trained in Python or other computer languages earn more money. Okay, now for the last pair of sentences. 4a. Bridges which are made of wood are not strong enough to hold larger vehicles. 4b with a reduced relative clause. Bridges made of wood are not strong enough to hold larger vehicles. All right, now we are ready for the next construction which uses past participles. That construction is called a past participial phrase. A past participial phrase is usually found at the beginning of a sentence and consists of a past participle that adds information about the subject of a sentence. Listen now to an example of a sentence with a past participial phrase. Shocked, I went home and slept. So, the past participle, shocked, talks about or refers to the subject of the sentence, I. Usually, past participial phrases are longer than just one word. Let's make our previous one-word participial phrase a bit longer. Shocked by the news, I went home and slept. Let's make it a bit longer still. Shocked by the news of my firing, I went home and slept. Now listen to 4 examples of sentences with participial phrases. 1. Produced by Volkswagen between 1938 and 2003, the famous Beetle is probably the world's most famous car. 2. Confused by the constructions, we all got bad grades on the test. 3. Written just after the Second World War ended, George Orwell's book 1984 became one of the most famous books of the 20th century. 4th and last. Unsatisfied by all of the products on the market, I decided to make my own. Okay, we have one final use for past participles. This use is the modal perfect and is typical of rather advanced English. The modal perfect is a pretty big topic actually, so what you will hear in this episode will be just an introduction. To construct a sentence in the modal perfect, you need a subject, then a modal verb with have, usually would have, could have, or should have, and then the past participle of your verb. So subject, and then would have, could have, or should have. And then a past participle. So we also usually use contractions in the modal perfect. So would have becomes would have, could have becomes could have, and should have becomes should have. So would have, could have, should have. Let's talk about each of these separately. Would have, could have, and should have, or would have, could have, should have. We will start with would have plus the past participle. We use would have to talk about imaginary actions in the past. So imagine, for example, that you went on a nice vacation to the south of France and you had a great time, but you also spent a lot of money. A colleague of yours at work, someone you aren't really crazy about because they are always a bit negative, says this to you. The south of France sounds like a lot of fun, but I would have gone someplace cheaper and closer. So, I would have gone someplace cheaper and closer. So, a few questions about this sentence from your annoying colleague. 1. When did the trip to France happen? In the past or in the present? So it happened in the past. 2. Who in fact went to the south of France, you or your annoying colleague? So the answer is you. 3. Does your colleague think that you made the best choice of where to go on vacation? So the answer is no. That's why he said he would have gone someplace closer and cheaper. And 4th and last question. Did your colleague in fact go on vacation? The answer is no. So listen to the original sentence again. I would have gone someplace cheaper and closer. Your colleague said this to talk about past actions that he thinks would be the best ones. And he was not in that situation to make the decision. This is pure speculation. Let's now talk about could have or could have. Could have is very similar to would have. We use both to talk about imaginary past actions. Would have is for people outside of the situation you're talking about. For example, your colleague didn't go on vacation. You went on vacation. And so if you are talking about your own past options, the places you thought about going to, but in fact did not visit, then you use could have with the past participle. Here are some examples. I could have gone to Spain. I could have gone to Montenegro. I could have gone to Cancun. So just one question. Did the speaker in fact go to Spain or Montenegro or Cancun? The answer is no. Those different places were options, they were possibilities, but in fact the speaker went to the south of France. And that is how we use could have with the past participle. We use it to talk about past possibilities, past options that a person did not in fact use. Okay, we have one final modal perfect construction. That construction is should have or should have. We use should've with a past participle to directly criticize a person's past actions. So imagine that you have a teenage daughter. She had a big English test and you wanted her to get a really high grade, but instead of studying, your daughter partied with her friends and got a lower grade than you had hoped for. Here is what you say to her. You should have spent less time partying and more time studying. And generally, if you want to say someone's past actions were not good and you want to make a suggestion about what you think would have been a better choice, you can use should have or should have. I will talk more about should have, could have, and would have, and other modal perfect constructions in a future episode. Okay, that's all for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all next Monday.